At 11:50 p.m. on the night before my 18th birthday, I was sitting on the edge of my childhood bed with a laptop, a video call, and a single document that my grandfather had set in motion 6 years before he died. By midnight, I had signed it. By 8 the next morning, my attorney had filed a legal notice at the county recorder's office that made every piece of paper my uncle had spent 2 months preparing completely worthless. By 9, my father and uncle were standing at the recorder's counter being told, calmly and formally, that they had tried to transfer property they had never owned. By 4 in the afternoon, my father was throwing a birthday party for me in our living room. My uncle was standing near the front door checking his phone with the expression of a man who has just understood how badly he has miscalculated. My father stood up near the cake table and told 20 guests that our family had exciting plans for the future. He looked at me when he said it. I said, "Thanks, Dad. Nothing more. My name is Iris. I turned 18 yesterday. 6 years ago, my grandfather took me to a cabin on Cedar Lake and spent a summer teaching me which fence posts were rotting and how to check a window seal and where the property line markers were buried in the earth. I didn't know then that he was also talking to a lawyer about that same cabin, about a trust, about exactly this scenario. He knew his sons. He had known them for decades. He understood that the moment he and my grandmother were gone, the cabin would be treated the same way his sons treated everything they hadn't built themselves, as an asset to be liquidated. So he made a plan, a quiet, careful, years-long plan, and he left one piece of it for me to find in a closet, behind a stack of old quilts, in an envelope with my name on it. This is the story of what was inside that envelope, what I did with it, and what happened when my uncle walked into a government office with a forged document and found out that the ground he thought he was standing on had belonged to me for 6 years. I want to tell you something before I take you back to the summer I was 12. I want to tell you about the specific kind of patience this required. Not the passive kind, not sitting still and hoping for the best. The active kind. The kind where you know something and you cannot say it. Where you watch people walk toward a wall they cannot see and you cannot warn them because warning them would let them change course in time. The kind where you smile at your father's birthday toast and thank your uncle for his $50,000 offer and say, "I'll think about it," to people who have already decided how the conversation ends. That patience is its own kind of strength. It does not look like strength from the outside. From the outside, it looks like a quiet teenager who does not argue back. But inside it is a person who has done her homework, who has read every document twice, who knows exactly what is coming and has chosen the precise moment when it will arrive. My grandfather taught me that kind of timing at Cedar Lake. He said, "Patience isn't weakness, Iris. It's timing." He was sitting on the porch watching a line he had cast into the water, and I thought he was talking about fishing. He was not talking about fishing. Before I take you back to the summer, I was 12. If you're here right now, thank you. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one and it means more than you know. The summer I turned 12, my grandfather picked me up in his truck and drove me 40 minutes to Cedar Lake. The cabin sat back from the water, surrounded by white pines so tall they blocked the afternoon sun. The porch sagged slightly on the left side. The screen door didn't latch right. Inside, it smelled like wood smoke and old books and something sweet I could never quite name. I have since decided it was the wood itself, decades of sun and rain soaked into the walls. Grandpa Harold and Grandma Vivian had owned that cabin since before my father was born. It was the oldest thing I had ever been inside. "Grab the other end," Grandpa said that first morning, lifting a fence rail from the woodpile. I grabbed it. We spent the morning replacing 3 rotted fence posts along the south side of the property. He didn't rush me. He didn't do the work himself and have me watch. He showed me how to check for soft spots by pressing my thumb into the grain. "If it gives, it's done," he said. And I pressed my thumb into a post and felt it yield like wet bread, and I understood. We worked together, side by side, and he talked while we worked. Not about important things, just about the posts and the grain and the way the morning light came through the pines. By noon, we were finished. Inside, Grandma Vivian had iced tea and 2 sandwiches waiting on the kitchen table. The one Grandpa had built himself the year they got married, solid and level and slightly too big for the kitchen, which was exactly right. She was reading on the porch when I came out. She patted the chair beside her without looking up. This cabin stays in the family. Grandpa told me that evening, wiping sawdust from his hands with a rag that had been a shirt before it was a rag. He looked out at the water, which was turning gold in the late sun. But family isn't always blood, Iris. Family is whoever shows up. I was 12. I thought he was being poetic. I told him that was nice. He smiled and didn't correct me. He wasn't being poetic. That whole summer, I came back to Cedar Lake every weekend. I learned where the water heater leaked and which window stuck and how to bleed the radiator. I learned the names of the neighbors down the lake road and which one had chickens and which one's dog was friendly. In October, Grandma Vivian taught me to organize the bookshelves by color because it makes the room feel warmer. And she was right. It does. Grandpa showed me the property line markers, old iron stakes he had hammered in himself in the 1970s, rust red and half hidden by grass. He showed me each one like he was showing me something I would need later. I didn't know then that he was already talking to a lawyer about exactly that property, exactly those stakes, exactly me. Back home in Ridgemont, the air was different. Our house was fine. 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed mowing, a garage my father Greg used as an office for his building supply store. Fine. Not warm. Just fine. My sister Kelsey was 10 and had the bigger bedroom, which had been freshly repainted lavender with a new desk lamp that cost more than my entire bookshelf. My room still had the carpet from the previous owners, a pattern that had been dated when they moved in. I had stopped noticing it. At dinner one evening that fall, Greg brought up the cabin. Dad's place is just sitting there, losing value, he said, cutting his steak. Property taxes alone are killing us. We should sell it and reinvest. My mother Denise nodded. Makes sense. Grandpa said the cabin stays in the family, I said. Greg laughed. Not a mean laugh, a dismissive one. The specific laugh of someone who doesn't expect to be disagreed with and finds the disagreement mildly amusing. You were 12, Iris. He was being sentimental. Nobody asked me anything else. The conversation moved to Kelsey's debate trophy. Regional finalist, very impressive, and Denise had already had the certificate framed. I had won the district science fair 2 weeks earlier. The ribbon was still in my backpack. After dinner, I cleared the plates. On the counter, half hidden under a grocery list, there was a glossy flyer. Ridgeline Development, lakefront lots, premium prices, now acquiring. There was a handwritten phone number in the margin. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I put the flyer back exactly where I had found it. Upstairs, I sat on my bed and thought about my grandfather's kitchen table. The one he built with his own hands. The one where Grandma Vivian set my sandwich without asking because she already knew what I wanted. I thought about the flyer. I thought about the handwritten number. Someone was already measuring my grandparents' home in dollar signs. Not yet, but someone was measuring. I was 12. There was nothing I could do. So I remembered it instead. Grandpa Harold died 2 years later. I was 14. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Gray sky, damp grass, folding chairs that sank slightly into the lawn. I sat in the second row holding his handkerchief. Blue plaid, frayed at the edges, smelling faintly of pine. Because I didn't know what else to hold. At the reception, I noticed my father and his brother Wade standing by the dessert table. Not eating. Talking low. Wade had a manila folder tucked under his arm. Greg was nodding. I was close enough to catch one sentence from Wade before they moved. We should move on this before probate gets complicated. They were talking about the cabin, at the funeral, while people were still holding plates of casserole and saying things like he was a good man. Too soon. I'm so sorry for your loss. I was 14. I had no power, no voice, and no idea that my grandfather had already accounted for this exact moment. So I said nothing and filed it next to the Ridgeline flyer in the part of my memory where I was keeping things that didn't yet have a name. 2 more years. Grandma Vivian got sick in March. By June, she was gone. The last time I visited her at the care facility, she held my hand, her grip surprisingly firm for a woman who was that close to the end. And she looked at me with the specific focus of someone who needs something to land correctly and is not sure they have time to say it twice. The cabin is yours, Iris, she whispered. Don't let them take it. Promise me. I promise, Grandma. She squeezed once and closed her eyes. At the second funeral, another gray day, same folding chairs rearranged on the same lawn, Greg sat at our kitchen table that same evening and said to Denise, "Now we can finally sort out the property." He said it with relief, like something heavy had lifted. His mother had been dead for 6 hours. That night, Wade called. I was in the hallway holding a glass of water, and through the garage door I could hear Greg's voice, lighter than it had been in weeks. "Yeah, no, I agree. Let's get it moving." I stood in that hallway for a long time after I heard those words. My grandmother's death was not a loss to them. It was a clearance. The last obstacle between them and the cabin had just been removed, and they were already on the phone. I didn't cry that night. I made a different kind of decision. I just didn't know yet how to act on it. Between 16 and almost 18, the cabin became my quiet act of resistance. Every Saturday morning, I drove to Cedar Lake in the used Honda I had bought with babysitting money. I patched the porch screen where the mesh had torn. I replaced the weather stripping on the back door. I swept pine needles off the roof because Grandpa had taught me that was how leaks started. Let the needles sit and they hold moisture against the shingles, and eventually the water finds a way in. I mowed the grass along the property line markers so nobody would forget where they were. I was not doing this because I had been asked to. I was doing it because it was mine to take care of, even if I didn't yet have the legal language to say so. At home, the conversations had shifted. The cabin had stopped being Grandpa Harold's place and had started being the family property. Greg said this at dinner like it had always been true. Wade came over more often now, every other Sunday sometimes, always with manila folders or a laptop open to real estate listings, always with the unhurried confidence of someone who considers himself the smartest person in any room he enters. I tried once. I asked, "What about what Grandma said?" She wanted me to keep the cabin. Denise put down her fork in the gentle way she put things down when she was about to correct something. "Your grandma was emotional at the end, sweetie. This is business." Business. That was the word they used for everything that used to be love. By 17, Greg had stopped trying to be subtle. When you turn 18, he would say, "We'll figure this out as a family." The way he said family, with a kind of preemptive ownership in it. The way people say we when they mean me. On a November afternoon, alone at the cabin, I was clearing out the hall closet. Behind a stack of old quilts, I found a sealed envelope. My name on the front in Grandma Vivian's handwriting. The same careful cursive she used on birthday cards. Inside, a single business card. Margaret Caldwell, attorney at law. And below her name, in small printed type, Timaine Family Trust. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from recognition. Grandma had left this here for me to find. She knew I would be the one cleaning out closets. Not Greg. Not Wade. Me. I slipped the card into my wallet. I didn't call. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was holding before I used it. 3 months before my 18th birthday, Margaret Caldwell called me first. Thursday evening in February. I was doing calculus homework when my phone showed an unknown local number. "Iris," she said, "this is Margaret Caldwell. I was your grandparents' attorney." Her voice was steady and careful, like someone who had rehearsed the opening sentence enough times to trust it. "I need to speak with you before your birthday. There are things you need to know, and we don't have much time." Margaret's office was small, organized, smelling of old paper and coffee. She sat across from me and opened a folder with a composed efficiency that I found immediately reassuring. The best lawyers, I have since learned, are the ones who can present devastating information without any drama whatsoever. "Your grandparents hired me 6 years ago," she said. "They established an irrevocable trust. The cabin, a savings account, and an investment portfolio. Total value approximately $2.1 million, all of it held in the trust. You are the sole beneficiary." The room tilted slightly. I waited for it to right itself. They transferred everything into the trust while they were still alive. Legally, none of it entered their estate. It cannot go through probate. Your father and uncle have no legal claim. She slid a document across the desk. A summary of the trust terms. My name on the second line. The title to the cabin had been recorded under the trust at the county recorder's office 6 years earlier. My father did not know that. The property had never been in his parents' names for purposes of inheritance. There was nothing to inherit because it had already been transferred. Why didn't they tell him? I asked. Margaret paused before answering. Your grandfather asked me to tell you something, and I've been waiting to say it. His words were, my sons will sell that cabin before the funeral flowers wilt. The room was quiet. I stared at my name on the paper. Then Margaret said, there's something else. Someone has been making inquiries at the county recorder's office about the cabin's title within the last month. I started paying close attention after that meeting. The following Sunday, Wade came for dinner. Afterward, he and Greg disappeared into the garage. The door was open a crack. Not enough to see, but enough to hear. I stood in the hallway and listened. Wade's voice, easy and businesslike. I already signed the purchase agreement with Ridgeline. $450,000. But we need the title clean before closing. How do we get it clean? Greg. Quitclaim deed. Dad's gone. Mom's gone. We're the legal heirs. We quitclaim the property to ourselves, record it, and sell. Wade. Is that legal? Greg. It's a standard real estate transfer between heirs. Nobody's going to question it. A pause. Then Greg, quieter. What about Iris? Wade's answer came immediately, like it had been prepared. She's 17, Greg. She can't do anything. And by the time she turns 18, the sale will already be through. Done deal. She'll be upset. She'll get over it. We'll give her a cut. $50,000 for college. She should be grateful. I stepped back from the garage door. My hands were cold. Wade had already signed a purchase agreement. $450,000 with a development company for a cabin he did not own, on land held in a trust he did not know existed. And if he couldn't deliver a clean title within the closing window, he would owe Ridgeline a $45,000 penalty. He had signed that agreement before checking the title, because he had assumed a real estate agent, a man whose entire profession was built on title searches, that nobody had planned otherwise. That night, I texted Margaret 2 words. They're accelerating. Her reply came in 3 minutes. I expected that. Come see me Saturday. We'll prepare everything you need. I closed my phone and stared at the ceiling. In the next room, Kelsey was laughing at something on television. Downstairs, my parents were loading the dishwasher, talking about weekend plans in the ordinary way of people who believe everything is still going according to schedule. And in the garage somewhere, in Wade's manila folder, was a contract that was already worthless. He just didn't know it yet. If this story is connecting with something in your life, if you've ever had to stay quiet to protect yourself when every part of you wanted to speak, subscribe and leave me a comment. I read everyone. It means more than I can explain. Margaret laid out the timeline on a legal pad, drawing lines between dates the way a navigator draws a route. The cabin title was already in the trust. Had been for 6 years. If Wade filed a quitclaim deed, the county recorder should reject it immediately, because the chain of title wouldn't match. The property hadn't been in my grandparents' personal names since 2020. Any document that named them as current owners would contradict the existing record. But, Margaret said, if Wade submitted additional documentation, an affidavit of heirship perhaps, or falsified supporting materials, he could create what was called a cloud on title. That wouldn't give him ownership, but it could tie the property up in litigation for a year or more. Long enough to cause serious problems. So what do I do? She tapped the calendar. The moment you turn 18, you are a legal adult. You can formally accept the role of successor beneficiary. The trust documents designated you at birth. Once you sign the acceptance form, I file a lis pendens, a public notice of legal interest, at the county recorder's office first thing the following morning. That freezes the title. Nobody can record anything against it while it's active. What if they've already filed something? Whatever they've filed will be flagged. The chain of title will show the trust recorded 6 years ago, not your grandparents as individual owners. Any conflicting document gets rejected. I nodded. What if they find out before I sign? She took off her glasses. Your grandfather specifically asked me to protect you, Iris, not to negotiate with them. I drove home. Greg was in the kitchen, cheerful. He said he was throwing me a birthday party. The whole family, Saturday night, big one, 18, was worth celebrating. He smiled. Denise smiled. Even Kelsey clapped. I smiled too. My father was planning a birthday party. My uncle was planning to sell my grandmother's cabin. And I was going to sit at the kitchen table and smile, because in 9 days I was going to let them believe everything was going exactly according to their schedule. 5 days before my birthday, my mother sat beside me on the couch. She used her let's talk like adults voice, soft, slightly rehearsed, calibrated for persuasion. Now that you're almost 18, she said, there are some family decisions we should make together. Together. The word landed like a costume over something else entirely. She laid it out. The cabin cost money to maintain. Property taxes, insurance, repairs. Greg's store had been struggling. If they sold, they could pay off the debt and set up college funds for both Kelsey and me. Both of us. Grandma wanted me to keep it. A flash of impatience crossed my mother's face, quickly smoothed. Your grandma was very sentimental at the end, Iris. Sentiment doesn't pay property taxes. Greg walked in then, right on cue, and I wondered whether they had planned this together. He said he had already talked to a buyer. Good price. Wade knew them. When I asked the company's name, he paused. Ridgeline something, he said. They're reputable. I told him I'd think about it. He patted my shoulder. That's my girl. And walked away satisfied, already somewhere else in his head. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Wade showed up unannounced. He caught me in the driveway, leaning against his car with his arms crossed, casual as a man who happened to be passing by. Wade was a real estate agent. Nothing he did was accidental. We sat on the front steps. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. The lot alone is worth $450, he said. I have a buyer I trust. Fast, close, clean paperwork. What do I get? $50,000 cash for college. I let the number sit in the air between us for a moment. Whose name is on the deed, Uncle Wade? The smile froze for a fraction of a second. Just a flicker, a micro adjustment behind his eyes. And then it was back. Your grandparents, he said, but they're gone now. It passes to your dad and me as next of kin. That's how it works. That's not how it works. And I knew it. And he should have known it because he sold houses for a living. But he was counting on me not knowing. I said I'd think about it. He drove away, and before he had even reached the end of the street, he was already on the phone. I could see his mouth moving through the driver's side window. That night, I texted Margaret again, still accelerating. 3 more days. She replied, stay the course. You're almost there. I can do 3 more days, I wrote. I said it to the screen and I meant it. The night before my birthday, I drove to the cabin alone. The road was quiet. Cedar Lake sat flat and dark under a half moon, and the pines along the bank were cut-out shapes against the sky. I parked in the gravel patch Grandpa had leveled himself, walked up the porch steps. The second one still creaked, just as it always had. And sat in the chair beside the one that used to be his. The air smelled like rain and pine resin, and the faint sweetness of the wood. I opened my laptop. Margaret had sent the full document package, the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, the beneficiary designation confirmation, a 1-page summary of the trust terms. Everything formatted, flagged with sticky tabs, ready for one signature. My signature. I read every document twice. Then I closed the laptop and listened to the lake. Grandpa used to sit right there and say, patience isn't weakness, Iris. It's timing. I always thought he was talking about fishing. The tears came without warning. Not a collapse. Not a dramatic breakdown. Just a quiet overflow that I let happen. I cried because I wished this were different. I wished my father had been the kind of man who would have brought me here to fish instead of calculating the property's resale value. I wished my mother had asked what I wanted instead of telling me what was practical. I wished I didn't have to sign a legal document to protect myself from the people who were supposed to protect me. But wishes don't hold up in court. Trust documents do. I wiped my face. I locked the cabin. I drove home. I lay down on my bed and set my alarm for 11:45 p.m. In 6 hours, I would turn 18. In 7, my family would find out that the cabin had never been theirs to take. 11:50 p.m. My bedroom door was closed. The house was silent. Greg and Denise had gone to bed an hour ago. Kelsey's light had been off since 10. I opened the laptop and connected to the video call. Margaret appeared in her home office, reading glasses on, desk lamp lit, a stack of papers beside her that I recognized as copies of the same documents she had sent me. She looked exactly like a person who had been waiting for this specific moment for 6 years. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." She walked me through the signing one final time, clear and methodical. I was signing the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, a single page that confirmed I was formally receiving the trust my grandparents had created. From the moment I signed, every decision about the trust's assets would run through me and Margaret as co-decision makers. No one else could sell, transfer, or encumber the property without both of our approvals. The clock on my laptop read 11:58. Margaret looked at me through the screen. "Your grandfather's exact instruction to me 6 years ago was, don't give this to her too early. If she has it before she needs it, Greg will find a way to take it. Let her need it first. Then give her everything." I looked at the document on my screen. "At exactly midnight," she said, "you'll be a legal adult in every sense that matters." I watched the clock. 11:58. The house was completely silent. I could hear the refrigerator downstairs, the faint sound of a car passing on the street outside, my own breathing. 11:59. I thought about my grandfather sitting on that porch in the summer I was 12, watching the lake turn gold, telling me that family is whoever shows up. I thought about him pressing his thumb into a fence post and saying, if it gives, it's done. I thought about him kneeling in the grass beside an iron stake he had hammered in himself, showing me exactly where the line was. He had been drawing lines my entire life. I just hadn't understood until now that some of them were legal documents. 12 o'clock. I signed. My name, in my own handwriting, on a document my grandfather had prepared when I was 12 years old. In the same summer, he was teaching me how to tell which wood was rotten and which was sound. Margaret confirmed the signature, updated the file, and said, "First thing tomorrow morning at 8, I'll be at the county recorder's office to file the LS pendens. Once it's recorded, the title is frozen. Nobody can touch it." I held the signed paper and looked at the names printed above mine. Harold T. Main, Vivian T. Main. Established, October 14th, 2020. 6 years ago, when I was 12, when I was spending Saturday mornings at Cedar Lake learning where the property line markers were buried in the earth. He had known, even then. He had sat beside me on that porch and watched the lake go gold and already known that the people who would try to take this place were not strangers. They were his sons. "Iris," Margaret said quietly, her voice softer than I had heard it across all our weeks of careful professional conversation. "This isn't a trick. This isn't revenge. This is your grandfather's last gift. You just had to be old enough to accept it." The clock on my screen read 12:03. I was 18. The trust was mine. And downstairs in the garage, in the folder Wade had prepared with his confident handwriting and his real estate agent's practiced authority, the quitclaim deed he planned to file in 9 hours was already a dead document. He just didn't know it yet. What I did not know, and pieced together later from what the county clerk told Margaret and what Greg eventually admitted during one of our harder conversations, was what was happening across town at that same hour. While I was signing my acceptance form at midnight, Wade was printing a quitclaim deed at his kitchen table. A one-page form that transfers property rights from one party to another. Legitimate when used correctly. A felony when the signer has no rights to transfer. He called Greg at 11:30. "Everything's ready. We file at 9. I want to make sure Iris is distracted with birthday stuff first. Are we sure about this?" Wade's reply was immediate. They're dead, Greg. We're next of kin. It's simple. It was not simple. It was forgery dressed in standard real estate language, moving efficiently toward a county recorder's office at 8 in the morning. Wade also had a second document open on his screen, a purchase agreement with Ridgeline Development. $450,000. Closing date 30 days after the quitclaim deed was recorded. If he couldn't deliver a clean title in that window, the penalty clause kicked in. $45,000 plus damages. He had signed that agreement 2 months earlier, before the title had been fully searched, before he had verified that the property was actually in the estate. He had assumed. He had assumed that his parents' deaths meant the cabin was his, and he had made a financial commitment on the strength of that assumption without doing the one thing his profession required, checking whether it was true. Wade had bet nearly $500,000 on a piece of paper that had never belonged to him. In 9 hours, he was going to find out. Margaret called at 8:14. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. Greg was upstairs getting dressed. Denise was making coffee. The normal sounds of a morning that was about to become something else entirely. It's done, Margaret said. The lice pendens is recorded. Whatever they bring in will be rejected on chain of title grounds. Good luck, I said, to no one in particular. At 8:30, Greg and Wade came downstairs together. Greg was wearing his business shirt, the button-down he saved for bank meetings and formal occasions. Wade had the folder under his arm. Same folder as always. We'll be back by lunch, Greg said, grabbing his keys. I looked up from my cereal. Good luck, I said again. Greg paused in the doorway and looked at me. Something in my voice or my face gave him a half-second of uncertainty. Then he turned and walked out. I didn't follow. I rinsed my bowl. I dried it. I set it in the cabinet, sat down at the table, and waited. I'll never know exactly what their faces looked like, but I know what happened because Margaret stayed at the recorder's office after filing. She had a chair in the waiting area near the door, and she watched. Wade approached the counter at 9:05. He slid the quitclaim deed across with a confident nod. The nod of a man who had done this 100 times, who knew how these offices worked, who was going to be in and out in 10 minutes. Greg stood behind him with his hands in his pockets, looking around the room with the mild interest of someone with somewhere better to be. The clerk took the document, typed the parcel number into the system, read the screen, typed again. Stopped. I can't record this document, sir. Wade leaned forward slightly. Excuse me? This property is held under the T-Main Family Irrevocable Trust, recorded in 2020. There's also a lis pendens filed this morning. That's impossible. My parents owned that property. They're deceased. Sir, the deed was transferred to the trust 6 years ago. The chain of title is clear. This quitclaim deed doesn't match the current ownership record. Greg stepped up beside his brother. There's no trust. Our parents never mentioned a trust. The clerk looked between them with the carefully neutral expression of someone who handles these situations more often than the public realizes. I'd recommend you speak with the trustee listed on the filing, a Margaret Caldwell. Wade's hand went flat on the counter. His face strained. Margaret's name, the name on the business card they had found in my bag, the name they had assumed was just some lawyer I had briefly consulted, was now on a public record they couldn't erase or ignore or reframe. Greg turned to Wade slowly. You said this was simple. I didn't know about any trust. You're a real estate agent. You do title searches for a living. How did you not check? Wade opened his mouth, closed it. The clerk said evenly, Gentlemen, I'll need you to step aside if there's a disagreement. Margaret watched them walk out without saying a word. She didn't need to. The birthday party started at 4 in the afternoon. The living room was full, maybe 20 people. Neighbors, a few of Greg's business contacts, people from church, Kelsey's friend's family. Nora Beckett from the Lake Road was there, sitting near the window with a glass of lemonade and the specific watchfulness of someone who already knew at least part of the story. There were balloons, a banner that said Happy 18th in silver letters, a sheet cake from the bakery on Main Street. Normal. Celebratory. The visual language of a family that has nothing wrong. I smiled. I thanked everyone. I opened small gifts. In my jacket pocket, folded into a precise square, was the signed acceptance form from the previous night. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. It was already done. Greg stood near the cake table and tapped his glass. I just want to say, Iris is officially an adult today. Denise and I are so proud of her. He paused. He looked around the room. And as a family, we have some exciting plans for the future. He looked at me and smiled. Right, Iris? 20 faces turned. Thanks, Dad, I said. Nothing more. Greg waited 1 beat, 2, then laughed it off and raised his glass. The room followed. Conversation resumed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Wade near the front door, checking his phone with both thumbs moving fast. Nora Beckett caught my arm as I passed the window. She leaned in close, smelling like lavender hand cream. Your grandmother would want you to know something, she said quietly. I saw your uncle at the cabin last week with 2 men in suits. They were walking the property line with a measuring tape. He had brought the buyers to survey the property before he even had the title. That was how confident he had been. After the cake was cut, Greg stood again. This time his voice was louder and more deliberate. A man who has been waiting for his audience and is done waiting. He announced it plainly. The cabin at Cedar Lake. The family had decided to sell it. He said it like it was already settled. He looked right at me. Iris understands. She knows this is what's best for all of us. Right, sweetheart? The room waited. I set my fork on my plate. The clink of metal on china was the only sound. I never agreed to sell the cabin, Dad. Greg's smile stayed fixed, but the muscles around his jaw tightened. She's kidding. Birthday nerves. I'm not kidding. Wade stepped forward from the doorway. Come on, Iris. This isn't the time or place. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, set it down. I looked at him. You're right, Uncle Wade. This isn't the time. I held his gaze. The time was 8 o'clock this morning. Silence. Wade's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't look at it. Nobody in the room moved. The guests left quickly after that. Polite goodbyes, tight smiles, the specific kind of exit people make when they can feel a storm building in someone else's house and want to be outside before it breaks. Within 30 minutes, the living room was down to family, Nora, and 2 neighbors who seemed uncertain whether to go or stay. When the last near stranger walked out the front door, Denise turned on me in the kitchen. She asked whether I had any idea what my father was going through. She told me about the house, the mortgage, the business that was failing. She said we were a family and families made decisions together, and if I loved this family, I wouldn't need a lawyer to tell me what to do. Then she said, we know about Margaret Caldwell. Wade found the business card in your bag last week. I looked at her. How long had they been going through my things? Before I could answer, Nora Beckett's voice came from the kitchen doorway, even and firm. That girl has every right to speak with an attorney, Denise. Vivian would have wanted that. Denise wheeled on her. This is a family matter. Nora didn't move. She looked at me, then back at Denise. Vivian was my friend for 40 years. I know what she wanted. The silence between them could crack glass. Nora left. The 2 remaining neighbors slipped out behind her. And then it was the 5 of us. Greg, Denise, Wade, Kelsey, and me. The kitchen door closed. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Greg sat down at the table and folded his hands. His voice was low and measured, the voice of a man delivering a final offer. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, Wade and I go back to the county office. We file the correct paperwork. The cabin sells. You get a fair share and we move on as a family. What's my share? Greg didn't answer. Wade, leaning in the doorway, filled the silence. 50,000. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at my father. And if I say no? Greg's jaw tightened. If you fight this, you're on your own. No more help with college. No more living under this roof. The kitchen was very quiet. The faucet dripped once. You're threatening to kick me out, I said. On my 18th birthday, I'm asking you to be part of this family. I pushed back from the table and stood. My voice was steady, even though my hands were not. I am part of this family, Dad. I'm the part that keeps promises. I walked past Wade, past Kelsey, who was sitting on the stairs with her knees pulled to her chest and wide eyes. I went upstairs and closed my door and sat on the bed and breathed. Greg thought his deadline was 9 in the morning. He didn't know that Margaret's had been 8. Over the next 3 weeks, the consequences arrived with the quiet efficiency of things that have been a long time coming. Ridgeline Development filed a civil suit against Wade T-Main. Breach of contract, misrepresentation of title, $45,000 in penalties plus $60,000 in damages. Their attorney sent the complaint to Wade's duplex by certified mail. He signed for it on a Tuesday. The county district attorney's office received a referral from the recorder regarding the forged notary stamp on the quitclaim deed. An investigator was assigned. Wade's real estate license was suspended pending the outcome. Word traveled. Not because I said anything. I said nothing. But court filings are public record in this county, and the filing named the Cedar Lake property by parcel number. The neighbors on the lake road read the local paper. They talked. Within 2 weeks, the story had moved through the Rotary Club, the church parking lot, and the checkout line at the grocery store on Main Street. Wade called me once. He asked me to speak with my attorney about lifting the Ellis pendants. He said my grandparents would be ashamed of me. I let that sentence sit for a moment before I answered. My grandparents, I said, are the ones who set this up. They planned it. They chose me. I don't think shame is the word for what they'd feel. He hung up. I set my phone down and looked at the framed photograph of Grandpa Harold on my desk. The one from the summer I was 12, both of us standing by the fence we'd repaired. I left it where it was. Greg did not contest the trust. Margaret had been right. The legal fees alone would have been devastating, and the case would have gone nowhere. An irrevocable trust established by mentally competent grantors, witnessed, notarized properly, and recorded years before their deaths is about as solid a legal instrument as the state provides. Instead, Greg did what he should have done 2 years earlier. He sold the building supply store at a loss, but enough to negotiate a repayment plan with the bank. The house stayed, barely. The savings did not. Denise went back to work for the first time in a decade. She took a position at a pharmacy on Lincoln Avenue, the same chain where she had worked before Kelsey was born. She didn't talk about it much. The town knew. Not every detail, but enough. Harold T. Main's sons tried to sell his granddaughter's cabin, and the granddaughter stopped them. That was the version that circulated at the diner and at the gas station and at the school drop-off line. Some people thought I was brave. Some thought I was cold. I didn't correct either group. Greg and I didn't speak for 2 weeks. The house was quiet in the specific way of a place where something has been said that cannot be unsaid, a quiet with weight in it. But on the 4th day, Greg came home at 2 in the afternoon and moved through the front door like a man carrying something invisible and very heavy. I was at the dining table. I didn't get up. He sat down across from me. He stared at the table for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, emptied out. I'm going to lose this house, Iris. The bank is at $180,000. The store is gone. That cabin was supposed to be our way out. I know you're struggling, Dad. I'm sorry about the business, then help us. The cabin was never your way out. It was Grandpa and Grandma's gift to me. A gift? He almost laughed. You're 18. What does an 18-year-old need with a lakefront cabin? It's not about what I need. It's about what they wanted. Denise stepped in from the kitchen doorway. They were elderly, Iris. They weren't thinking clearly at the end. They were thinking clearly enough to hire a lawyer 6 years before they died. Greg slammed his palm on the table. I'll contest the trust. From my phone on the table, a voice. I had called Margaret before Greg came home and left the line open, not to trap him, but to save time. Mr. T. Her voice came through, steady and professional. Contesting an irrevocable trust established 6 years before the grantor's deaths, with full legal capacity documented and witnessed, will cost you more in legal fees than the property is worth. I'd strongly advise against it. The kitchen was silent. The faucet dripped. Greg looked at me, really looked, for the first time in weeks. And I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not anger, recognition. 2 hours later, the house phone rang. Greg picked up in the living room. I was in the hallway, close enough to hear both sides through the thin wall. Wade's voice came through the receiver, stripped raw. Ridgeline is suing me. $45,000 in penalties plus damages. They're saying I committed fraud. Greg's reply was colder than I had ever heard from him. Did you? I thought we owned it. You're a real estate agent. You do title searches for a living. How did you not check? I assumed. You assumed. And now I'm sitting here with nothing because you assumed. And you forged a notary stamp. A long pause. Wade's breathing getting heavier. I didn't forge. I just found a stamp. That's forgery. You know that's forgery. I need a lawyer. So do I. Greg paused. Don't call this house again until you've talked to one. He hung up. I heard him sit on the couch. The springs creaked. Then nothing. I went upstairs. Kelsey's door was open. She was sitting on her bed with headphones around her neck, eyes wide. Is Uncle Wade in trouble? Yeah, Kelsey. He is. Is Dad? I sat on the edge of her bed. Dad made bad choices. Uncle Wade made worse ones. She nodded slowly, processing it the way 15-year-olds process things, not fully understanding, but knowing enough to be unsettled. The town knew. Not every detail, but enough. Harold T. Maine's sons tried to sell his granddaughter's cabin, and the granddaughter stopped them. That was the version that circulated at the diner and the gas station and the checkout line at the grocery store. Some people thought I was brave. Some thought I was cold. I didn't correct either group. Then Nora Beckett brought me a pie. Apple, still warm. She set it on my desk and looked at me with the direct assessment of a woman who has been watching a family for 40 years and has made her peace with what she has seen. Your parents made their choices, she said. But they're still your parents. Don't carry their shame. That's theirs. I nodded. And then Kelsey called one evening from a friend's house, voice small. Iris. I don't understand everything that happened, but I'm sorry they put you through it. My throat tightened. Thanks, Kelsey. Are you okay? I'm getting there. I drive to the cabin on a Saturday morning in late April. The dogwood trees along the lake road are blooming, white and pale pink against the dark water. I park in the gravel patch Grandpa leveled himself, walk up the porch steps. The second one still creaks, just as it always has, and I have decided it will always creak, because it is not a flaw. It is the step's personality. And unlock the front door with the same key Grandpa gave me when I was 14. In case you ever need to get in when we're not here, he said. I didn't know then that he meant permanently. The cabin smells the same. Pine and old books and that sweet, faint something that I have decided is the wood itself. Decades of seasons absorbed into the walls. I walk through every room. The kitchen table Grandpa built. Still solid, still level. The grain of the wood still showing its pattern the way old wood does, with a kind of patience about it. Grandma Vivian's bookshelves organized by color. The bedroom where she read to me when I was small, when I would fall asleep in the middle of a page and wake up with a blanket I didn't remember being put under me. The porch where Grandpa and I watched the lake turn gold on Saturday evenings, saying very little, needing to say very little. In the desk drawer by the window, I find an envelope. My name on the front in Grandpa Harold's handwriting. Margaret had told me it would be there. She had been holding the information for after the trust was settled. One final piece he had asked her to preserve. I open it carefully. One page. blue ink, his handwriting getting looser toward the bottom, the way it always did when he was tired. He tells me he knows his sons will try to sell this cabin. He doesn't blame them. Greg is his boy, and he loves him. But Greg never understood the difference between something that has value and something that is valuable. He says he chose me, not because I'm perfect, but because I was the one who asked whether the roof needed patching before I ever asked what the place was worth. The last line reads, "Take care of it. It took care of you first." I fold the letter. I sit on the porch. I breathe. Margaret called the following week. The lease pendants could be withdrawn now. No active threat to the title remained. Once cleared, the property record would show the trust as sole owner. Clean. No encumbrances. No clouds. As for Wade, he settled with Ridgeline for the $45,000 penalty, paid through a personal loan. His real estate license remained suspended pending the district attorney's investigation. The forged notary stamp was still being reviewed. His income had stopped. The deal he had been so certain of was entirely gone. And then Margaret said, "There's one more thing. In the trust documents, your grandparents designated a separate educational fund. $50,000, earmarked specifically for your college expenses. It's been accruing interest for 6 years. The current balance is just over $58,000. I sat with that for a moment. 50,000. The same number Greg had offered as my share of the sale. The same number Wade had dangled like a bribe on my front steps. 50 grand for college. You should be grateful. My grandparents had already set it aside. Quietly, without telling anyone. 6 years ago, I enrolled at Ridgemont Community College that week. Environmental science with a minor in forestry. The campus is 20 minutes from the cabin, closer than my parents' house. Under current address on the housing form, I wrote the cabin's address for the first time. It felt like coming home, because it was. I asked Greg and Denise to meet me at the coffee shop on Birch Street. Neutral ground. Somewhere public and calm. They arrived together. Greg was wearing a flannel I recognized, one of Grandpa's, which I don't think he realized. Or maybe he did, and it meant something. Denise had her purse held tight against her side, the way she held things when she was nervous. "I love you," I said, when the cups were on the table. "Both of you. I need you to know that because what I'm about to say might not sound like it." I told them the cabin was not for sale. Not now, not ever. That I would not be made to feel guilty for keeping a promise I made to a woman who trusted me to keep it because she didn't think anyone else would. I told them I wasn't cutting them out of my life. But if we were going to have a relationship, it had to be built on respect. Not on what I could give them. Not on guilt. Not on the idea that I owed them something just because they were my parents. Denise started to speak. I told her to be honest about what had happened first. Greg stared into his coffee for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix it today." I stood. "Left enough cash for all 3 coffees. I'll call you Sunday." He nodded. One small nod. It was not forgiveness. It was not resolution. It was a beginning, and a beginning was all I could ask for. I walk out into the sunlight. A month later, Kelsey shows up at the cabin on a Sunday afternoon with a pizza box and her old oversized hoodie. We sit on the porch with paper plates on our laps. The lake is still. A heron stands in the shallows near the dock, motionless, waiting. We eat slowly. We talk about her school project, about the heron, about whether the dock needs new planks this summer. At some point, she leans her head against my shoulder for just a moment. Then she sits up and takes another slice. It didn't just protect property, this cabin. It made room for something new. Early June, 6 in the morning. I'm on the porch with coffee, watching the mist lift off Cedar Lake. The pines are sharp against a pale sky. A loon calls somewhere out on the water. 2 long notes, then silence. I didn't win against my family. I want to be precise about this, because winning is the wrong frame for what happened. There's no trophy for surviving something that should never have happened in the first place. When the people who hurt you are the people who were supposed to protect you, you don't win. You survive. And then, if you're fortunate, you find solid ground. I found solid ground because two people loved me enough to plan for it years before I needed it. They saw the storm before I did. They built the shelter before I knew I would need one. My grandparents could not stop my father from being who he is. They couldn't make him less desperate or less willing to treat a place full of memories as a transaction. They couldn't keep Wade from chasing money that wasn't his. They couldn't change any of the choices that were made in the years between their deaths and mine. But they could make sure I had ground to stand on. Literally. I think about the letter in the drawer, about Grandpa's words, the difference between something that has value and something that is valuable. This cabin has both, but only one of them can be measured on a spreadsheet, and my family spent years focused on the wrong one. They measured the land value, the lot size, the lake frontage, the proximity to the developer's other properties. They did not measure the Saturday mornings, the fence posts, the weight of a blue plaid handkerchief at a funeral, the specific warmth of a kitchen table built by hand, the sound of a creaking porch step that is not a flaw, but a personality. Those things cannot be recorded at the county office, but they can be protected by what is recorded there. I sip my coffee. The mist clears. The lake turns blue. If you're listening to this and you feel like nobody is in your corner, I want you to hear me. Sometimes the people who protect you are not the ones standing in front of you. Sometimes they planned for you years ago, quietly, without telling anyone, because telling anyone would have undone it. Sometimes the protection is already in place before you know you need it. All you have to do is show up, sign the paper, and keep the promise. Peace does not come from revenge. It comes from standing on something solid and knowing you did not build it for spite or for satisfaction or for the pleasure of watching someone else fall. You built it, or in my case, you received it, because you are worth protecting. My grandfather believed that when I was 12 years old. He believed it enough to build a legal structure around it while he still could. He believed it enough to fund an attorney for 6 years, to plan for every contingency, to write a letter he knew might sit in a drawer for a decade before I found it. He believed it before I knew how to believe it about myself. I look at the lake. I hear the loon call once more. 2 notes, clean and carrying. I keep my promise, Grandpa. I'm keeping it right now. And if this story found you at the right moment, if someone in your life ever prepared something to protect you, even after they were gone, I have another story waiting for you right now. A woman who discovered that the people she had been quietly protecting for years had prepared something for themselves instead. What happened when she found out is a story worth hearing. The link is on your screen right now. I'll see you there.